So a few videos ago, I had a whole series on the Steampunk receiver from the early 1930s, mid-30s vintage receiver, regen, battery powered. And I promised that I would build a transmitter to match it, and we could take this transmitter into the field, perhaps to a civilian conservation corps camp, which is nearby, and reproduce a mid-30s ham radio station at a CCC camp. So I've begun to collect parts for such a transmitter, and I've selected a transmitter that was quite popular in the mid to late 30s called the Jones push-pull oscillator. Now the Jones can be built with battery tubes like the Type 30 triode. The Type 30 triode was a very popular battery tube in the 1930s, and this should be something that we can power up and perhaps get a watt or two out of on a breadboard type transmitter that we can take to the camp and run the whole thing on battery power and see if we can make some contacts on 80 meter CW. So this is just going to be a kickoff video. We'll go through some of the parts I've collected. We'll go through the schematic of the Jones push-pull oscillator and a little bit of history. So this is an old-time 1930s transmitter for portable use. Building a 1930s portable transmitter to match the small regenerative receiver, which was built with thin copper sheet material, but I do need an enclosure, so it's not just simply a breadboard piece of wood with something built on it, but it has an enclosure. This is to both protect the unit and to aid in its portable design. If you're able to carry something with you with a handle, totally enclosed, unitized, it's much easier to quickly set it up with all of the controls and connectors as part of the unit rather than a bunch of wires that you hook up. Again, we're going for a couple of watts for 40 meters or 80 meters inside the transmitter. Not a high power transmitter, something portable that can be run on battery power. That's the goal. And again, portable transmitter in the 1930s. This was quite popular. There were many expeditions going to the Arctic and other places that were remote which needed portable systems. So they were using these battery tubes and of course operating the equipment in the field with battery power. So you've got to watch your current lighting up the tubes, and you've got to keep your current drain down as far as possible so that your transmitter doesn't go dead when you're on the North Pole. That would be a bad situation.
So let's talk about portable a little bit. Of course, the expeditions that occurred in the late 1800s and early 1900s were notorious for people becoming lost and people freezing to death and so on. So having wireless along on these expeditions became a thing in the 1930s. The world wanted to have real-time news, and there needed to be communications for resupply, liaison, rescue, safety purposes, so radio was an essential element. But kicking this trend off was the 1928 to 1930 bird expedition to the South Pole to establish a permanent base called Little America. This expedition was going to be radio equipped to the absolute maximum, with no less than 5 radio operators, most of them ham radio operators, by the way. And hams around the world were eager to work this new Antarctic base. The ships, aircraft, and the base itself were all equipped with high power gear and professional receivers. Based on the descriptions that I've found in this QSL card, the main base used a conventional tune plate, tune grid, 2-valve transmitter with a pair of gigantic 204As. The 204A, it's got about a 250 watt plate dissipation, and this breadboard transmitter built at the AWA Museum to commemorate the 1921 transatlantic transmission, it gives you an idea of the components you need for running the legal limit, or about 500 watts out. You can see that this breadboard has some pretty beefy parts. Of course, the bird transmitters would have been in professional cases, both in the ship's aircraft and at the base. So how do you say permanent? Take a look at the Little America dipole antenna with its wide-spaced feeders. Now that's a serious antenna. There's no trees in Antarctica, so they brought and erected 3 very impressive towers. Reportedly, frequencies from around 500 kilohertz to 16 megahertz shortwave were covered with the station. The station receiver was state-of-the-art, by the way. A brand new General Electric 1496 featuring plug-in coils, complete shielding of the RF preamp screen grid stage, and a separately shielded regen stage, and 2 stages of audio amplification. We want to know about portable sets. Well, it turns out that the expedition also carried several 45-meter dogsled transmitter receivers, portable transmitter receivers built by the Burgess Battery Company. These were truly portable shortwave sets running on dry cells. Burgess published several circulars detailing some of their laboratory work on the lightweight aircraft radios. This work led to the idea of using these low-power, well-shielded, and very lightweight and dry cell-powered transmitters and receivers for the various Arctic expeditions, and later Antarctica. I have pretty good information on the 1927 developments of a 2-valve transmitter and a 3-valve regenerative receiver. As you can see in this fairly hideous schematic, by the way, the receiver is at regenerative stage with 2 following stages of audio amplification. The valve of choice was the low filament drain UX199 or the 299. The plug-in coils cleverly use a standard CX or a UX bayonet socket mount so that the coils are vibration resistant as well as the tubes. The Antarctic dogsled receivers would have been of this type with only minor modifications in the aluminum case. The 1927 aircraft transmitter was a simple MOPA, a master oscillator power amplifier type, built with 201A valves. The oscillator was a free-running coal pits driving the final amplifier. With 360 volts on the power amp and 180 volts on the oscillator stage, they claimed about 4 watts output on CW. The oscillator could also be absorption modulated with a carbon microphone. This primitive modulation style no doubt produced a lot of FM too. Anyway, the mess was amplified somewhat linearly by the final amplifier, affording short-range voice communications. Unlike the receivers, we have strong evidence that the transmitters were slightly modified for the expedition. First of all, the valves were changed out from O1As to UX201Bs. Now the 201Bs have a 60 milliamp current drain, so they're much lower power drain tubes, and the expedition ordered about 50 of these new valves. The transmitters were made crystal controlled with a single frequency of around 6.6 megahertz. I don't have an exact schematic of the new arrangement using crystal control. I have, however, taken the liberty of making what I believe they would have done to convert from a free-running master oscillator, a Colpitts, to some type of crystal control, while preserving the features of the transmitters. I also believe that they have probably disposed of the AM microphone capability in the new set. Maybe not, I'm not sure. Again, this is a best guess on a schematic. From the movies and pictures that I do see in the record, they definitely use 2 10-foot bamboo poles or a nearby aircraft or other structure to support what we would call an inverted L. So you stick the bamboo poles in the snow and you create effectively a quarter wave inverted L off the transmitter. And these are short, only about 30 feet long, because we're talking about a quarter wave inverted L. They simply ran a counterpoise wire under the wire on the snow. So this U-shaped antenna is something you're probably not used to, but it's just about equivalent to a low dipole. The output was resonated with a tapped coil system in concert with a tunable series capacitance, so you had complete series resonance of the U-type antenna. There was a tuning bulb which could be switched out. You simply tune this for maximum current in the bulb. This would have produced a beautiful high-angle pattern over the snow, similar to a low dipole. So everybody's an antenna engineer. Let's go a little bit deeper into the antenna that they would have used on the expedition. For obvious reasons, the expedition needed something expeditious when it came to a portable antenna. The ideal antenna would be able to be erected in a few minutes, would have a minimum wind load, and it would operate well very low to the ground, and it would require only 2 support poles. Based on the use cases, the first one, a short-range ice pack scouting mission of 1 to 5 miles, and the second use case, a long-range exploration and resupply carron mission of 100 to 200 miles. Both vertical and omnidirectional and high-angle NVIS horizontal polarization were required. Today, we'd immediately go to an inverted L antenna, or what we call the end-fed half-wave, the EFHW antenna. A half-wave antenna at 46 meters is around 20 meters in length. This would have been an excellent radiator, but it's a little bit too long practically. The quarter-wave inverted L was a compromise approach. This antenna has both vertical and high-angle energy. The gain of the antenna was less than that of the half-wave, of course, and it was governed basically by the length of the counterpoise underneath it. The ideal length would be a half-wave of counterpoise under the quarter-wave antenna. A long counterpoise is not an issue because it's on the snow. Now the gain of this extended counterpoise U antenna starts to approach the gain of a normal NIVIS dipole. Realizing portable operation with dry cells up to the minus 75 degree Fahrenheit temperature possibilities of the Antarctic, the battery boxes were specially constructed and insulated with balsam wool. These dog sled radios turned out to be a huge success story for the expedition. So for my battery-powered transmitter, I want to use a classic mid to late 30s circuit, the Jones push-pull oscillator. This crystal-controlled transmitter can use 2 Type 30 battery tubes for low current drain. I can build it in a wooden box like I described, or if I find one, a metal case of the appropriate size and shape, like a small signal generator case, I'll stick it in that. So here's my working schematic. I'll go for a design that's flexible enough to work on 80 meters or 40 meters with crystal control. By next time I should have something to show you, something I'm building. And I know that somebody's going to ask, hey, can this circuit be built with solid-state components? Yes, absolutely. Here's an example using a couple of common MOSFETs for maybe a half watt or a watt output.
So I've laid my hands on a couple of probably appropriate cases that this thing might go in. The one on the left is big enough to put the transmitter and probably the battery pack with plenty of room. It's an old instrument case, and I like the depth on it. It's not too deep, about 6 inches deep. The one on the right, a little bit smaller case. I don't think you'd be able to get the batteries in there, but the transmitter might be able to squeeze in. That would be a very compact case, and it would somewhat match the size of the receiver. So I'm not quite sure which way to go. Maybe I'll use the larger case because it'll make the construction a little bit easier to see for you guys. Now that I've seen what they did in the old days and the quality of the construction, I'm thinking of going with a more professional looking system, and these cases look great. Now I can use a metal front panel on here, or I could use the wooden front to make construction a little faster and actually put a wooden chassis inside. So it would be an all wooden design that would simply go right into the case. So the transmitter would actually be able to be used outside the case. I think that's the way to go. And then you simply mate it to the case at the last second and bring the power through the appropriate hole, or put the battery pack in just before you put the device in the case. Anyway, stand by. Next time we should have something on a breadboard. We'll see if we can get a little bit of power out of our battery portable 1930s style transmitter to match the Steampunk receiver.